as there is in this scene. There's a hint of it here that this cop is a very twisted, evil guy. And the fact that he now risks his life for this woman is a huge turning point in this story. So all the way along, from the very, very beginning, it was a very interesting question. This exact question had to be posed for the whole film. How into the film does this score get? And it became apparent to me when I saw the temp that whenever the temp tried to get into it and play it with any sort of degree of, okay, I'm in the scene with the characters and with the emotion, I'm underlining the emotion and I'm helping it and I'm supporting it, it seemed to make it weaker. It seemed to actually weaken it. And that the strength of the film was coming from, I guess for lack of a better word, this very harsh realism. And yet it was continually, you're bombarded from the beginning of the story with this just harsh realities of contemporary life, just the sides of it that we don't want to look at, that we don't want to talk about, that we're having a hell of a time solving in modern life. What can the music do to really make this experience more than what we're seeing, what we're experiencing? And it really came up to the only way I can sort of describe it, and it comes actually from talking, I knew what it was structurally, I knew what I had to do musically, but how do you describe what I'm doing? So it's sort of like the music is 3 feet above the movie, almost all the way through. It's like the angel that's sitting on the shoulder of the audience and saying, I'm going to help you through this experience. You know, there is hope. You know, man is basically good. And I'm going to take you through this 2-hour experience and help you experience this and help you learn from it.
You mentioned the temp. I read an interview, if I can find it here. You referred to the temp. Oh yeah, you were quoted here saying the temp score was all over the map genre-wise, but emotionally it was consistent. It was a decent temp score. It obviously wasn't anything like this and wasn't obviously anything like the finished product. What were the elements in the temp? Again, this is a long-standing association you've had with Paul. What were the elements in the temp that were an indication of a direction to go, or if the genre of the temp was completely different and completely foreign, how could you translate that into what Paul wanted to have eventually?
The temp went everywhere from a solo guitar record by Mychael to that huge piece that was written by Jonathan Elias, I believe. It's the LSO, and it's got Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and pop singers and choirs. I mean, it's the music for 2000, I think. It must have cost a fortune to make. And I must admit, when I saw the film with that in there, I had to talk to the producer just to make sure he knew what they were doing to me. This was a very, very, and I hate to bring, this is part of modern filmmaking. This next part of this discussion this is a very, very low budget film. And when you see a piece of music in a temp that the piece of music costs to reproduce as much as the entire film would.
And it works effectively.
And it works well, then you're in trouble unless you have a down-to-earth nuts and bolts discussion, especially when it's a package deal. And for those of composers know what that means. That means that the company gives the composer all the music budget and you give them a score. And leaves all the decisions about what you spend on the score up to you.
And you get to keep whatever's left over.
You get to keep whatever's left over. So you become, a producer to that degree. You have to decide what what the movie's worth, what your child's, private school tuition is worth to you, and take it from there. The budget on this film wasn't going to pay for anything, so it was really how do we get this done. So a long-winded explanation as to what I learned from the temp. I learned that the Mychael Brook piece for solo guitar was as effective as the music for 2000 people was, which was good news, because basically I could see that this film could be effectively scored by a small group or perhaps even a computer-based score. So I said to Paul, I can continue, and I will give it my best shot to score this for the money that you have. Otherwise, that's something you really have to you got to sit down with the producers and say, if this is what you're expecting, you can't have it. It's just a pure logistics question hurdle that has to be crossed. So that's sort of two general ideas here that sort of came forth. This music needed to sit on top of the film. It could be ambient in nature. It could be small in nature. It could also be big I think this ends up with a fairly big sound, but it's a big constructed sound. This was all done on a G3 Macintosh in my house.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the next clip we're going to see from Afterglow?
Yeah, I took the alternative word to heart. I tend to agree that I came into film scoring in a sort of not the same road, but a similar sort of back door as a jazz musician and as a synthesizer programmer. And so to me, it's the same exact point of view that every tool is available. And I didn't necessarily have the training to write for huge romantic style orchestra in the style of Shostakovich. But it's a tool that I knew was out there, and over the course of years, I taught myself how to do that. So after a number of years in the business, I now have that tool also. But I've never really felt this sort of idea of the alternative score. It's more of just, it's sort of like alternative rock. It's you do it in small. You sort of do it in smaller clubs, and you make less money.
It's a lousy designation. I think really it's fairly clear that both Mychael and you, and I'm sure Rolf, do the kind of music you do.
Exactly.
And you have a wide range, and this is what it is, and
yeah,
it's what it is. So.
And films like this, which are lower budget films, where the director is willing to take a chance on the whole film, and then willing to be exploratory, be adventuresome in the musical choices, because he doesn't necessarily have a corporate answer that he has to answer to. And it allows you to make these choices, which could be considered alternative choices. But
it still takes a lot of trust.
It takes a huge amount of trust.
And you mentioned at one point the directors have to be brave.
They'd have to be very brave. You have to be brave to make a film like this. You have to be brave to sit down with a composer and say that this is how we're going to score it, as Mychael showed us.
So anyway, as to Afterglow, what will we be seeing?
Well, Afterglow was a very brave choice, perhaps the bravest choice I've ever made in this regard. Alan Rudolph and I have actually probably made more films with him as a single director than anyone else. I think we've made 10 films together. And it sort of got to the point where we would just send each other stuff. I would send him music I was making. He would send me scripts he was writing. I sent him a jazz record that I'd made. And he, unbeknownst to me, sat down and wrote a script to that record.
Based on the record, great.
And then a year or so later, he called me up and said, you know that script that I mentioned I was inspired by your jazz record? We got a green light. We're going to make it. So he said, I need that music, but new. I need that again, and new that fits the picture. So I thought, well, what if fantastic opportunity to do something really brave, to really make a jazz score. And by that I mean, to me, the essence of jazz is improvisation. A jazz score, sort of in a Duke Ellington style, where he would score it out and all written and it's for jazz ensemble, is one type of jazz score. But a jazz score where you'd have a motif and 5 guys in a room and you give them a 5-note motif and you just say, go, and that is going to score the film, is a dangerous and brave move. But that's what we decided to do. And this goes right to what Mychael said, the element of trust. Because the first person you have to commit to be by your side and to hold your hand and to stand up for you is the director. And if they will say yes, if they will back you, then you can do this. But without that first sales pitch to the director and say, this is what's is going to be cool to do.
In this case, however, you can't do mock-ups.
In the jazz?
Yeah,
well, that is a problem.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that is really a problem.
Now, let me interrupt you just for a minute. Is that a problem in that the director obviously has to show his film to somebody else, and studio execs like to see mock-ups as well. Did you have to get around that one, or did you work as you went? Or
we sort of worked as we went. I did little sort of mock-ups of the themes, just bass and piano. Mm-hmm. In a couple of key scenes, he put some temp music in to get around that. But Alan was one of those rare directors that could get away without doing a lot of that stuff. His films were generally low budget enough, and he generally had really diehard supporters, at least shielding him from those that might be interested in hearing it first.
now, are you performing on this as well?
I am.
That
So
doesn't
actually
make it a little harder?
It did make it a little harder, but I decided, I've seen Jodie Foster direct herself and Robert Redford direct himself, and I said, if they can do that, I should be able to compose and record myself performing.